And you mentioned Brian McLaren a few minutes ago, who is his movement, which is the Emergent Church.
Right.
I don't think we clarified that he's the head of the Emergent Church. But again, as you said, the Emergents participated in Ramadan this year. And as you said, too, no evangelism takes place. It's just a big kumbaya, and we love each other and sing kumbaya and have group hugs and all of that. So the truth is never told. Even at evangelical efforts to have this, I don't think in America we call it Chrislamic as they do in Europe, but these interfaith dialogues, they always withhold the gospel and they just say nice things to each other, even though much of it is not true. Now, you suggested, Gary Codd, that some of the pastors that you talked to in the UK, they were going along with all of this primarily out of naivete. They just don't understand some of these issues.
Yeah, that is true. Now, in Scotland, and I want to clarify this, in Scotland, there are some neat things taking place, and there is a revival taking shape among a remnant there. People are waking up, including many of the pastors there, especially because of one individual over there who's having quite an impact. But in the UK as a whole, largely I think because of the influence of Tony Blair and that he has had over there, about 2 years ago, he started the Tony Blair Faith Foundation, which I've kind of nicknamed the Tony Blair Interfaith Foundation because that's really what it's all about. His stated goal is to unify the world's religions. And he's been teaching a course at Yale University along those very lines, how to bring all the religions of the world together. And what's particularly bothersome is how many Christian leaders have gotten behind Blair, thinking his ideas are great. One of them on this side of the pond being Rick Warren, who is on his board of directors, along with a Muslim and people of other religions.
Gary, if I could just slip in here, that Bill Hybels featured him a couple of months ago in his leadership conference.
Well, and Bill Hybels invited Tony Blair to speak at his church in Chicago.
That's what I'm referring to.
Yeah.
Is Bill Hybels invited Tony Blair and Bono and others to their leadership conference and to make inroads into the church there.
Yeah. So this is going on in the United States in a major way now, but the real impetus, I believe, came from Tony Blair about 2 years ago. He got the ball rolling in a public way, and if you want to go back even further, you can go all the way back to 1986 and Pope John Paul II. He invited approximately 200 religious leaders representing all the world's major faiths to a meeting he held in Assisi, Italy. And I've got an actual video of that meeting, of much of it, and to see the footage, it's really quite incredible. There were people from other religions practicing, in some cases, occult ceremonies right there in the presence of the Pope and some of these other religious leaders. And then following that meeting, the Pope made a trip to India and Thailand, where he intermingled with Hindu and Buddhist leaders and even participated in some of their ceremonies. That also is on this video footage. And from that time forward, mostly behind the scenes, but increasingly out in the open, it's become fashionable for religious leaders carrying the banner of Christianity to become very close to religious leaders of other religions. And during the 90s, this gained momentum with meetings of the Parliament of the World's Religions. And by the way, they have a big meeting, maybe their biggest ever, coming up in Melbourne, Australia in December. And they've been planning for this one for several years, and thousands of people are expected to be there, religious leaders from around the world. And so they keep pushing this interfaith agenda, the coming together of the world's religions through various forums, at the Vatican, through the Parliament of the World's Religions, and through people like Tony Blair, who are out front in the public eye, calling for the coming together of the world's religions. And Barack Obama has been doing his share of that. And, of course, maybe his biggest supporter is Oprah Winfrey, and she's in the camp on this in a major way. So a lot of very influential, prominent people in the media, in politics, in religion all pushing this quite openly now in the last year or two.
Okay, if you've joined us late at this hour, I am talking to Gary Kah. Here's how you can get a hold of him or find his products. Sign up for his newsletter, and that would be GaryKah, KAH.org, GaryKah.org. And I do recommend that you sign up for his print newsletter, which is just a wealth of information. There's a slight charge for that. Gary, I think, by the way, going back to an earlier issue I raised a few minutes ago, you sounded a warning there with the UK pastors. How did they receive that warning?
Well, that remains to be seen. I'm going to be in touch with our contacts over in Scotland where I spoke. But overall, we really did receive a pretty warm reception. A lot of the pastors stayed around afterwards to talk with me. Some of them voiced not as much concern with what I said as surprise that they didn't understand or were aware of the fact that some of these Christian leaders were doing what they were doing, and wondering, is there any chance that they're just naive themselves, that they aren't aware of what they're involved in? And I told them, I've been giving some of these people the benefit of the doubt for years. And a few years ago, I wrote Rick Warren a letter, and I sat on it for days, prayed over it, tweaked it, didn't let go of it until I was absolutely sure that everything was worded the way the Lord would have me worded. It was written in a spirit of love, and I shared a little bit with Rick about my own political background when I worked for the lieutenant governor and some of the doors that opened up for me politically, and some of the things that I learned back in those days about certain organizations and some of their agendas, moving us toward globalization, ultimately global government. And I expressed my concern that he had become involved in one of those organizations, and just wanted him to be aware of what it was all about. Because years ago I was invited to join two different organizations. One of them I joined thinking it was all right, and then finding out after I got into it that it wasn't. The other organization I never did join because I understood where it was going. And so again, I laid all this out in a letter as carefully as I could, and was hoping to hear back from him. Well, I never did. And since that time, he's gone on to join other organizations that are in this camp. He's spoken before various groups promoting the climate change agenda. He's now viewed as a darling by the UN and the Council on Foreign Relations. And there's just too much stacked against him now. And even though he's still a professing Christian and he will say appropriate things about Christ, the fact that he's on the board of directors with Tony Blair of his foundation, when that happened, I pretty much, I can't give Rick Warren the benefit of the doubt anymore. I'm sorry, and that may upset some people because I know he has a lot of fans out there. But I think he has just crossed the line on numerous fronts. And I have to keep asking, what would Jesus do?
All right.
And would Jesus associate himself directly with other religious leaders in such a close camaraderie kind of way where you end up promoting their events and their religion by doing what you are doing? And I don't believe Jesus would ever do that. He would talk to them. He would argue persuasively, as the Apostle Paul did. It's not that you want to be hostile toward these people. You want to show them the love of Christ. But it's gone way beyond that.
Well, he was one who, on July 4th, did speak to the Islamic Society of North America, an outfit that promotes terrorism, finances terrorism. I did a whole hour on it, and I don't want to revisit it, but I think that was the tipping point for some people, a lot of people, because he had a 25-minute message before the Islamic Society of North America, and other than quoting a couple of biblical passages, it was all let's kind of get along and the whole kumbaya thing. But I think we've said enough about that.